Yes, so thanks for allowing me to come back up here once again to talk about a topic which is obviously of great importance and was also already mentioned this morning when we were talking about what should be the priorities as we're going forward on cybersecurity in Europe. If we're going to look a little bit at where we are on the industry, I think it is clear to say that having in place a strong cyber industrial ecosystem is of course important for economic reasons, but when it comes to cybersecurity, you can also add that it's extremely important for our resilience. So it cannot just be business as usual when it comes to organizing our industrial base. We like to say that if you can measure, you can manage. So I want to start by talking a little bit about where we are today in terms of the industry. If we're looking globally, we have around the European market is around 25% of the value, but then if we remove the UK from that equation, we're actually all the way down to having only 17% of the market. If we're looking at the 500 biggest companies in cybersecurity globally, we can come up to 67 of those that are European. If we're looking at the last mergers and acquisitions in the cybersecurity market in 23, 41 of the 180 companies were acquired by non-EU players. And of course, we also observe that non-European companies have significant market shares in Europe. So when we look at the civilian side of cybersecurity, it's up to 75% of the market that's taken by non-Europeans, and in defense military, it's up to 20%. We also have within the Union an extremely fragmented market. It is characterized by a lot of SMEs, around 97% of our companies are SMEs. And still, we have that the large companies actually take home 74% of all revenue generated. So what does that tell us? It tells that cybersecurity is a bit like many other tech industries where the winner takes it all. And that is one key lesson learned we have to keep in mind, because we heard it this morning, talking about startups is great, scaling is even better, and becoming a serious market player is of course the thing we need the most. At the same time, the cake is getting bigger, so of course cybersecurity is a growth market globally. It's normal. In Europe, depending a little bit on where you look, it's estimated between 7 to 10%. And this is of course a growth that's of course driven very much also by the geopolitics of it. A very interesting study that came out recently from the World Economic Forum, where they went and discussed with CEOs and with CISOs, it actually showed that around 70% of business leaders have stated that geopolitics has changed their mindset on cybersecurity. So it's good news. It means that they are reading the newspapers and that they're also translating this into their business strategies, and rightly so. We also know that around a third of our CISOs in the big companies are adjusting now their cyber strategy to also address a new threat landscape. But sadly, of course, at the same time, everyone acknowledges as well that we have a serious lack of skills. Around half of the people surveyed actually underline the lack of skills as being a major issue. From the side of Commission, we can also say that we have been driving the cybersecurity market, maybe not in the most direct way, but of course we know that with NIS2 and with the Cyber Resilience Act, we are creating markets. NIS2 will create a big market for managed security services, and the CRA equally, of course, with its requirement for security by design, is also pushing the cybersecurity agenda straight in to the business quarters. There are some that see this mainly as an, let's say, requirements, as a heavy burden, but at the same time, I think we should also be open to see this as what it also is, which is a business opportunity. So I think the big question we also need to address is how are we going to ride on this wave of growth in Europe? How are we going to translate all of this into business opportunities? To do this, we need to, of course, look at the dependencies, the gaps, but also what are the new opportunities emerging. I will start with the first one, which I already mentioned before. When it comes to skills, I think the situation we all know is dire in Europe. The latest figures I saw is around 357,000 people missing in terms of cybersecurity skills. We are making an effort. We launched the Cyber Skills Academy, etc. And if there's anyone in the audience that have not yet signed up and participate in those actions, I would of course encourage you to do it. But at the same time, we also need to be more open towards other sectors. We need to understand that if we want a strong cyber industrial basis, it's not only about cybersecurity skills. We need AI skills. We need people working on quantum. We need software engineers. So it is a much bigger issue than just looking at the cyber skills. And of course, when we talk about this, we also need to look further into our ecosystem, and we need to ensure that there are people working on finance who understand cybersecurity. That's just one example of how far we actually need to go when the intention is to develop, retain, and attract skilled people in Europe. In terms of investments, we can also do better, I would say. If we look last year, the total amount of money raised in the cyber sector decreased by 42%. We have currently an investment gap of 1.75 billion in Europe. We see successful companies leaving Europe, and we are generally falling behind on venture capital investment if we look at those with whom we normally compare ourselves. There are many factors from this. I think if we're looking at the market overall, we can of course see a trend that we also see in other sectors, which is we're actually quite good at basic R&D, but the closer we come to the market, the more the water is leaking out of the pipe, so that at the end of the pipe, when we come to actually generating businesses and markets, there's not so much power left as when we're looking at the R&D. So going forward, we need to focus more on skills. We need to focus on creating the conditions for leveling, to ensure the level of investment and to develop this ecosystem dynamics that we, for instance, see in the US and in Israel. That means much bigger focus also on the financing side. We need to work with venture capital funds. We need to work with equity. And we need to leverage more this public-private partnership also in this field. Another area that's opening up much more than what we have seen in the previous year is, of course, the whole question about synergies with cyber defense investments, dual-use investments, developing, I would say, joint technology roadmaps, because at the end of the day, the technology basis, when you're looking at the lower TRLs, whether it's for cyber defense or cybersecurity, are actually very similar. So we also have to make sure that we don't duplicate investments, but we actually have a streamlined approach, whether it's for civil or for defense purposes. And then looking ahead, of course, we need to have a much more focus on the emerging tech. We've seen how AI is changing already, disrupting a number of sectors. We see it being taken up in cybersecurity, but we can also expect that we have only seen the top of the iceberg yet in terms of the potential for artificial intelligence. Quantum computing is another area, and then I think in Europe, knowing what we're good at, for instance, cryptography, we should not be blind to the opportunity that lies in connection of many, many critical entities having to shift to post-quantum cryptography. This is going to be a big field in the future. We launched recently a recommendation from the side of the Commission to support member states in this transition. And I think when we're looking at this, there will certainly also be market developments in this field. It will generate things. So I've talked a little bit about all the many challenges. I talked about how we all need to work together. And of course, this is also one of the reasons that we put in place the Cybersecurity Competence Center in Bucharest. It is the center that has the capacity to bring together all the different actors we mentioned, whether it's member states, the EU side, academia, private sector, etc., it can bring all of them together. It will also allow us to pool the investments to overcome the fragmentation and to actually develop more the synergies between the civilian and the defense side. So for what we are heading into going forward, one should certainly expect that it will become a major driver in this effort. So I've given you now a little bit of a state of play on where we see things standing in terms of both investments and so let's call it the ingredients that goes into having a sound industrial ecosystem in Europe, how we see the market emerge, but also what are the perspectives from our industry as we move forward. From our side, we of course use both Horizon Europe program, Digital Europe program, and other funding programs to push this effort. But there is the old cliche in cybersecurity that it's a team sport. I think it can also apply to not only when we do cyber defense or other things, but also when we develop industrial ecosystems, because we will need to actually bring in everyone on board to have both the European Union, the member states, public, private, academia, and as I said, also the finance center needs to be much more involved in this so we can do a concerted effort. Thank you.